This music, pure nostalgia. Hey everyone, it's been a while. I hope you're doing well. So, I've been watching patheralix Goldbound Challenge recently and found it to be very entertaining. And since I wanted to get back into playing World of Warcraft Classic, I thought, why not try this challenge in vanilla? For those of you who aren't familiar with the challenge, here's a quick rundown of the rules. Your character cannot leave an area until he earns enough gold to purchase a WoW token. Then a neighboring zone can be unlocked, where you are then again bound until you earned enough. Items can only be obtained from questing and looting, and you can sell items in the auction house, but you are not allowed to buy them. Or as patheralix put it, one man, one zone, one goal, escape. Of course, since we are attempting this challenge in vanilla, there are a few differences compared to retail. For example, no WoW token. Obviously. So I had to set myself a different goal and gold requirement, which I will explain soon. There's way less gold overall, NPCs and drop tables are very different, and honestly there's too much stuff to get into now, so I guess I'm going to cover it along the journey. I picked a pretty fresh server, Thunderstrike, an anniversary realm which is about 8 months old and still progressing, and I'm starting completely clean in this one. No other characters on the realm, no sending gold from mains, just a pure fresh start. I thought long and hard about the amount of gold I should choose to lock myself into a zone. I even thought about binding this decision to a certain purchase, like a mount or a rare item from the auction house. In the end, I decided on the amount of 50 gold. Now, this number is not set in stone. I really struggled with this decision and I'm still a bit unsure about it, so please let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to reading your ideas in the comment section. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Coppercoin, our Night Elf Hunter. This choice is actually pretty personal for me, because my very first character ever was also a Night Elf Hunter. I used to play on the PC of my best friend back in 6th grade, and I wasn't really questing or doing professions, nope. I was just grinding through the Night Elf zones, slaying one full burg after another, much to the bewilderment of my friend, but we both still remember this time very fondly. This also means we are locked to Teldrassil, which I was looking very much forward to for obviously nostalgic reasons. Sorry for repeating myself so early, but this music just hits different. In terms of the challenge, the starting area did not have too much worth mentioning though. We picked up a bag from an NPC drop quite early on, which, granted, is always an amazing feeling, but other than that, it was the usual kill and collect grind. We also found a chest along the way, which didn't bear any good loot, but after selling some chunk we made our first silver, which felt great actually. I stayed a little longer than usual in the spider cave, the trash loot sells surprisingly well for this level, and I wanted to hit level 6 before leaving this part of the zone. It hurt to use my hard-earned cash for skills and ammunition so early, but at this point those purchases are crucial to get along faster. I sold some trash, checked for a chest one more time, without success unfortunately, learned some more skills and moved on. By the time we left Shadowglen, I had about 3 silver in cash and a bag full of junk. That's when it hit me. This journey was going to be a long one. So the plan was clear. Get to level 10 as quickly as possible, tame a pet, pick up a profession and start improving my farming efficiency. Now, once we move into the next area, things actually get a bit more interesting. The enemies around here have a much better loot table, meat for cooking, materials for crafting, much more useful drops overall. Since I was going to be grinding the local wildlife anyway, I picked up a quest from this trustworthy looking fella and got to work. Our extra bag already started pulling its weight. I picked up herbalism for obvious reasons and also learned cooking. partly for the easy quest XP, but also because it might become profitable later on.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Now, you might be wondering why I didn't just learn skinning right away. The trainer is all the way near Darkshore, and I figured I'd wait until I had some more loot to sell at the auction house before making the trip. While grinding, my add-on suddenly pinged a rare mob, Urasun. I got excited. Maybe he'd drop another bag or even a nice bow. Also, sorry for the bad fight. I kinda panicked because of my excitement, and in the end, I didn't really get anything of value. Shortly after, I handed in the Satyr quest. What a nice guy. I dinged level 7 and got an extra silver coin and quest rewards after selling. Not bad. Back at Dolonar, I made a tough decision to buy another bag. Yes, it costs a huge chunk of our hard-earned silver. Less downtime means more grinding, and more grinding means more gold in the end, right? Also, equipping a new bag at this stage of the game is just pure joy. Moving on, I ran into Urasun again, but still no luck. So I kept myself busy gathering some herbs and appreciating the little wins along the way, like food crates. Honestly, after hundreds of hours in Classic WoW, it's funny how exciting those tiny advantages feel in challenges like this one. Eventually my bags were bursting, so I made a trip to Darkshore before level 10. I didn't want to create a male twink without asking you first, and I was curious to see what herbs and mats would sell for on the auction house, which is fortunately linked to other auction houses in this version of the game. This would have been a real pain otherwise. I also thought about buying bags from the auction house, but decided that would break the spirit of the challenge, and the rules for that matter, plus the thrill of looting a rare high slot bag is just too good to pass on. On the way I finally learned skinning, another way to fill my bags up even faster. I finally arrived at the auction house, dragged my peace bloom towards the sale window, and fuck. The economy was devastating. Some herbs sold for less than vendor price, linen and leather barely turned a profit. With a heavy heart, I posted some of them anyway. I mean, you gotta start somewhere, right? The others I banked, hoping they would sell a bit better later. And I even thought about vendoring some herbs for some fast cash. At that moment, I had maybe 8 silver to my name, and my goal is 50 gold. How on earth was I going to reach this in that economy?
In this economy?
But then, hope. One of the quest rewards I picked up back in Dolonar, a recipe to be precise, was actually listed for around 10 gold on the auction house. Because the quest isn't too easy to access, and I guess collectors want it might actually sell. But even if it does, and that's a big if, it's just a one-time win. As you probably know, I just can't get any more copies of this recipe with this character. So how exactly am I supposed to finish this challenge with such little profit margins? Well, I guess that's what makes this exciting. This isn't just going to be a brainless grind for popular mats that I thought it might be.
Are you sure about that?
I need to get creative. And honestly, I'm looking very much forward to the rest of this journey. We continue at level 9, making use of some rested experience while grinding. My main focus was on finding earthroot, as this is one of the more valuable herbs at this level. During the grind, I came across a couple of swords, but unfortunately, I can't equip them. The trainer is located in Stormwind, and since turtling there isn't really an option right now, they are destined to be rendered, I guess. At least I had better luck with a chest that contained some useful items, several grey pieces that sold for a decent amount, and even a piece of copper ore. I was curious to see how much it might sell for on this particular server. While gathering herbs, I picked up plenty of peace bloom and silver leaf. They don't bring in much money, but raising my herbalism skill is important at this stage. Even in low-level areas like this, there are occasional spawns of Mage Royale. I didn't know how much it would sell for, but I had high hopes it might be worth more. The timberlings in the area also drop herbs, including Mage Royale, so I kept that in mind as a potential farming spot. Interestingly, in later expansions of WoW, you can even gather herbs directly from their corpses, but of course not here in Classic. At one point I encountered the rare Dusk Stalker. It would have been a fine pet, but without the taming ability I couldn't take advantage of it. Shortly after, I found my first wild Mage Royale, and to my surprise it also had a chance to contain Swift Fizzle. This could be very valuable, as Swift Fizzle is an ingredient for popular recipes such as swiftness potions or fizzle tea. This discovery gave me a lot of motivation to continue. A little later I found a gun that I couldn't use either, helped out a friendly druid I met along the way, and sold the various items I had collected. Since I had no luck with rare encounters, I decided to invest 5 silver into another bag. It felt expensive, but it was worth it for the extra space. I even camped around a Mage Royal spawn for a while, thinking it might turn into a steady source of profit, but luck wasn't on my side. At least I managed to reach level 10 while farming in that area. Around the same time, I picked up the strange glowing fruit quest and explored another Mage Royal spawn point nearby. Before going on much further, I started the pet taming quest line. Having a pet would make farming both faster and safer, and this just felt like the right time to get it done. I also trained a few new skills, but decided against drag humanoids for now. It simply doesn't feel useful. While doing the pet taming quest line, I thought about what kind of pet should be my first one. I considered practical aspects like upkeep, food costs and availability, but in the end, nostalgia won. I will show you in a minute what I mean by that. To complete the quest line, I visited Darkshore once more. A good time to check the auction house again. The results were mixed. Copper ore didn't sell for much. Ruined scraps of leather looked suspiciously overpriced. Maybe some sort of trap for quick buyers, so I listed mine cheaply. Light leather wasn't profitable either. Earthroot, on the other hand, had increased in price, which was encouraging. The real highlight, however, was the Swift Fizzle I had looted earlier, listed for around 34 silver. That was a big step towards my first goal of reaching 1 gold. But as always, balance follows hope. Mage Royal itself turned out to be nearly worthless, even less than vendor price. A viewer had mentioned in the comments of my first episode that bots might be influencing the market, and this seemed to confirm it. Still, I tried to stay positive. There was no reason to give up. Instead, I put some herbs in the bank to keep my bags tidy and learned the rest of my pet taming skills. Speaking of which, to prepare for my new pet, I also went fishing. Even if the fish wouldn't sell for much at the auction house, at least it would provide affordable food. After checking the prices, mud snappers turned out to be fine for feeding, while small fish and, ironically, catfish might turn a bit of profit. But before resorting to such drastic measures as fishing, I went out to tame my new companion. I knew that the spotted stalkers have a bit more attack speed and are therefore a bit more viable when it comes to combat, but by such small margins that I went for style, and the type of cat I started WoW with about 20 years ago. Everyone, meet Silverfang, my new companion for this journey. With him, my farming efficiency increased noticeably. Around the Harpies, I discovered a very promising spot. In a short amount of time, I found several chests, one containing a pearl, another a silver bar, and plenty of useful loot. I also completed the quest Tears of the Moon, which would reward me with some useful silver, a nice bow, at least I thought so at that time. While hunting in the area, I was on the lookout for a rare NPC Black Moss Defeated, who drops the Moss Twinned Heart, a quest item. Nothing too much of value, but some experience and silver wouldn't hurt. Plus, I decided to hunt down every rare NPC in Teldrassil for fun. Some of the Harpies also dropped light feathers, which is an ingredient for levitate and slow fall, and because of that, pretty much always in demand. I was hoping for a high price with this one. I also found a good bow, but decided to put it up for sale since at that point I thought I would get a nice new bow from my recently completed quest anyway. With a mix of hope and junk in my bags, I decided to visit Darkshore once more. Back at the auction house, things were looking up. Light feathers went for around 11 silver apiece, silver leaf prices had recovered a bit, so I collected the remaining herbs I had stored in the bank and put them in. On the flip side, the selling price for malachite and small pearls was very disappointing. But every little bit of profit counted. That's when I also realized that I had confused one of the quests and mistakenly thought I would get a better bow reward from Tears of the Moon. After double checking, I decided to take my bow out of the auction house again because it was still better than what the quest offered, and the small amount of silver I could have gained wasn't really worth the loss of damage. More DPS simply means faster farming. Then I went to the mailbox, opened my mail for the first time, and there it was. My first gold coin in this challenge. A small step for sure, but motivating nonetheless. After checking some tailoring products, I decided it really wasn't worth it yet to drop leatherworking for tailoring. Maybe once I had a big stack of linen cloth, but for now the numbers just didn't add up. I also thought about picking up alchemy, but when I looked at the low-level potions, yeah, nothing really anyone would pay for. So I stayed put. I set Darkshore as my home, emptied my bags, and went straight back into the wild and encountered Grimoire, a rare Fulborg. He didn't drop anything, but another name crossed from my kill bill. Then it was time to grind harpies. The problem was, only the Harpie matriarchs would drop light feathers, which meant farming efficiently was the key. So I figured out a little farming loop, moving from one spawn point to the next. After about an hour of grinding, I had a decent pile. A handful of feathers, several severed talons worth about 1 silver a stack, and the usual bunch of linen cloth. Not too bad, but not amazing either. To be frank, I was getting pretty tired of harpies. The problem was, nothing else in Teldrassil came even close in terms of valuable drops. The spiders were too low level to give silk, and the stalkers dropped nothing but cheap grey items and a bit of light leather. And as you might remember from the auction house, this was not really worth my time. At least I found another small pouch, which gave me the idea to bag my remaining arrows and free up at least a bit of extra space. After about another hour of farming, my bags were full again. Stacks of talons, some linen cloth, 16 light feathers, and a bit of equipment that I immediately vendored. Normally, I would have trashed it to farm more feathers, but I ran out of arrows anyway, so back to town it was. Unfortunately, when I returned to Darkshore, light feathers were selling quite low, which was very disappointing. I decided to hold onto them and stash them in the bank for now, waiting for the price to recover. For a change of pace, I went fishing again. In terms of gold making efficiency, not exactly great, but I decided to take a break from those harpies. I kept checking my mailbox and reposting unsold items, but I resisted the temptation to open up the gold from sales. I wanted to make some real progress before counting my earnings. Still, the grind continued, and to be completely honest with you, I had a bit of regret choosing Teldrassil as my starting zone. Being barred from mining here turned out to be a huge problem, especially since herbs were basically worthless on the server. The Harpie spot was decent, sure, but it was a bit unreliable. Other players questing in the area, RNG on matriarch spawns, and the fact that light feathers didn't always sell for as much as I hoped. Timing was everything, and sometimes it just wasn't on my side. After a bit more farming and an enchantment drop I had very high hopes for, I finally went back to sell again. At that point I had logged about 13 hours of playtime in total, and I was curious to see how much gold I had actually managed to gather. So I logged out for a break, came back refreshed, and then it was finally time to open my mail.
You've got mail.
And there we have it. A few silver shy of 9 gold. Less than I hoped for, but it could have been worse, I guess. So, after some serious thinking, and for the sake of both entertainment and my own sanity, I've decided to adjust the goldbound total for Teldrassil down to 25 gold. In my opinion, that's still high enough to make me work for it, but at least it's somewhat manageable. I really want to push into the next zone, try out more farming methods, and have a few more options at hand. My plan was always to aim for 100 gold in Auberdine anyway, so instead of splitting it 50-50 between the two zones, we'll now go for a 25-75 split. I think that's a fair adjustment. It keeps the challenge tough, but also realistic. For a bit of change of pace, I started the session by finishing off some of the quests I had left in Teldrassil. While doing so, I ended up helping out another fellow hunter. Them being at level 7 and with no pet doing this quest reminded me of myself when I first got to this area. Let me tell you, this was not a pleasant experience. As a hunter, you had a hard time in those tight and winding corridors in this cave, with full bergs respawning right on top of you. The rewards for these quests were nothing special, but for most players they were probably among the first greens they ever received in World of Warcraft. Moving on, I also made progress on my personal little side challenge of hunting down every rare NPC in Teldrassil. This time I managed to kill Fraggle, which felt like a nice box ticked. While searching for him, I realized something interesting. The area wasn't half bad for farming. The mobs are low level, they drop a lot of linen, and there's pretty much no downtime because everything dies so quickly. Sure, there aren't any amazing high value drops, aside from the occasional green, but the sheer loot per minute was actually kind of impressive. Simply being in another area made the grind a bit more enjoyable too. Of course, I couldn't resist gathering a few more herbs along the way. Even though herbalism hasn't been the most profitable profession so far, every bit counts. And occasionally you do hit a swift fizzle. I was actually hoping to round off my rare mob collection by dragging down Sister Shielda. But unfortunately I arrived a bit too late. Someone else had beaten me to it.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Still, persistence pays off. After some more grinding, looting and selling, I finally hit a new milestone. 10 gold in the bag. Now, 10 gold might not sound like much to most of players, but at this stage of the game and in Classic, I was pretty happy with it. Back at the auction house, there was also a moment when a friendly hunter offered to gift me a nice tunic. Of course, by the rules of this challenge, I had to respectfully decline, but if by some chance you are watching this, thank you very much, good sir. Naturally, I went back to one of my usual routines, Harpie farming. They are not the most glamorous of mobs, but at this point, they were the only few consistent sources of income. And after a bit of persistence, I finally managed to encounter Sister Shielda again and complete my side quest of hunting down every rare NPC in Teldrassil. By this stage, the grind for experience was slowing down. Most quests were done, and regular mobs just weren't giving anything anymore. The exception being the Harpie matriarchs, since they were higher level. With a lot of grinding, I eventually managed to hit level 16. Looking back at this footage, I had a bit of regret. I should have kept my quiver and only swapped to bags once I was running low on arrows. Losing that attack speed bonus really added up over time. Oh well, lessons learned for the future. While farming, I came across a nice dagger and decided to just equip it. I had been struggling to sell weapons at the auction house, and because the fees are disproportionately high compared to the actual value of low-level weapons, I did not want to go through the trouble. So instead of losing money trying to sell it, I figured I get more value by just using it for myself. Back in Darkshore, I did the usual routine: selling junk, checking auctions and going through my mail. On top of that, I spent some time fishing again to stay sane and get some cheap food for Silverfang. Also, since the fish weren't selling for much, I decided to cook and bank some of them instead. My thought process was that increasing my cooking skill now might open up profitable recipes later on. After a good bit of farming and another night's sleep, I couldn't resist taking another look at my profits. I had been grinding hard, and the anticipation was killing me. Could this finally be the breakthrough I needed? When I saw the number, I honestly felt a rush of relief. 20 gold. The hard work was starting to pay off, and it was time to make the final push towards the Goldbound requirement. Since I still had one more quest in my log, I decided to clear it while farming along the way. That meant killing a lot of fullbergs on my path to Ursel. The enemies here were low level and went down quickly, which actually made for a nice farming loop again. Combined with the plentiful herb spawns in the area, it felt efficient enough to stay a bit longer. After banking my hauls and putting more auctions up, I went to bed with high hopes. And sure enough, the next day the mail told the story I had been waiting for. $25 gold. I had finally broken free of Teldrassil. Roughly 20 hours of playtime, countless dead harpies, and more herbs than I care to count. But the goal was reached. It was finally time to move on. Before leaving, I took a moment to review my character's progress. As you can see here, I didn't push skinning much further. It just wasn't worth it, and I'll likely swap it for mining or alchemy soon. Fishing and herbalism are high enough to be useful in Auberdine, and cooking is something I'll focus more on in later zones. It's interesting to see how each profession has its peaks and valleys depending on the market and in this stage of the game. So, to summarize this part of our journey. Random green drops and chest spawns turned out to be surprisingly great. Light feathers were another key item, especially since they are always on high demand. Also for players at level 60 who have a lot more resources to spare. Herbs on the other hand were a bit of a disappointment. Overfarmed starting zones and bot activity kept prices low. Swift Fizzle had potential, but it was way too inconsistent to rely on. Leatherworking and skinning didn't shine here, mostly because leather drops are rare in this level and my roots focused on humanoids anyway. Fishing was relaxing, but not really a moneymaker yet. Still, I have a hunch that this could change in future zones. One more thing I wanted to introduce going forward is a slight rule tweak. When I reach a new Goldbound threshold, I will allow myself to purchase one single item from the auction house. The catch is, whatever I spend, I'll have to make up for in the next zone's threshold. As an example, for this milestone, I decided to invest in a 12 slot bag for 88 silver, which I then have to make up for in Auberdine. Combined with learning the rest of my hunter skills, this means our new target in Auberdine will be 76 gold and 25 silver before we can unlock Ashenvale. And let me tell you, Ashenvale is one of my favorite zones in World of Warcraft. It's going to feel like a reward in itself once we finally get there. But looking at how long it took me to hit 25 gold in Teldrassil, I'm both excited and a little nervous how and when we will get there eventually. It was finally time to leave Teldrassil behind and make my way through the portal to Auberdine. Technically, I could have gone here earlier, but that portal always felt like more than just a doorway, more like a passage into an entirely new chapter. And in truth, I hadn't missed out on much by waiting. Maybe the fish cooking recipe, since sliver skin mackerel is quite handy to level up cooking at early levels, but it is also available in Ironforge, so there's not really a reason for any Alliance player to buy it from the auction house at a higher price. And you have to keep in mind, even my spider kebab recipe hasn't sold yet. No big loss here, I guess. Off we went to Darkshore, and right away this place felt completely different compared to Teldrassil. What made Darkshore special to me was that it didn't follow a straight path to progression. You start in the hub of Auberdine, and from there you can head north or south. The further you go, the tougher the enemies become. Compared to other areas where you move more linear, like Ashenvale for example, Auberdine feels quite unique, but also a bit dragged out at times due to its design. Well, here we are. And of course, faced with countless quests, new farming opportunities, and special rare NPCs to hunt down, I went fishing. It might sound odd, but I'd just come off a long day of work and I didn't feel like pushing into tougher quests. Plus, I was curious to see how much oily blackmouth would sell for. If memory served, this fish is used in a bunch of useful alchemy recipes. On top of that, I picked up some strangle kelp along the way for good measure. And wouldn't you know it, both actually sold for a pretty penny at the auction house. Alchemists turn oily blackmouth into blackmouth oil, and that oil is then used for potions. Combine it with strangle kelp, and you've got yourself a free action potion. One of the most useful PvP consumables in Classic, and in high demand. Not a bad way to start things off. To my surprise, Darkshore groupers also had a lot of value. They make for good pet food, but more importantly, they are tied to a quest in Darkshore. I was curious to see if I could sell them to players who didn't want to waste time fishing. If that worked, it could have been a solid little side hustle, and if not, I would need them soon for my quest anyway. But I had a feeling we would fish plenty of them as a side catch while being in Auberdine anyway. I put the other fish in the bank, ready to use them for cooking later on. After a short break, it was time to pick up quests. I knew farming would be more profitable, but I'm a completionist at heart, and there's just no way I can ignore those shiny yellow exclamation marks. So I filled my quest log to the brim, picked up mining along the way, and got to work. While fighting some of the local crabs, I noticed they had a solid drop rate for clams, and by extension, clam meat. Both meats are useful for leveling cooking to a moderate level.
I thought we were having steamed clams.
No, I said steamed hams.
And pearls can also drop from the clams. Unfortunately, I knew pearls were pretty worthless on the server's auction house, which made me assume the meat wouldn't be that valuable either. Still, it was nice to see that even crabs could turn into a potential income stream. And honestly, I was just happy to finally be in a new zone. Within minutes of arriving, there were so many opportunities. Rare spawns, useful ingredients, fresh herbs and ores. Auberdine was already shaping up to be very promising. The next area confirmed this feeling. While questing here, I came across my very first brews wheat. Thanks to all that grinding back in Teldrassil, my herbalism skill was high enough to pick it up. Brews wheat, briar thorn, a rare spawn, chests and lots of linen cloth from the NPCs with almost no downtime. Just a few minutes in those ruins gave me a boost in confidence that the grind to 100 gold would be more enjoyable. I also encountered the rare NPC Lysidin. I wasn't too sure yet if I would hunt down every rare in Auberdine, but of course I would not mind getting some of them either. After finishing a bunch of tasks, I picked up my rewards, sold a bit of junk and checked the auction house. To my surprise, clam meat sold quite well despite being plentiful, at least in theory. Other cooking ingredients didn't, so I banked those. Groupers hadn't sold either, so I just used them to finish the quest for now. Returning to Auberdine, I ended up in the old Fulbrook camp. Back in the day I spent hours grinding mobs there, so being back here hit me right in the feels. Not long after, I ran into a rare spawn, Flagelmurk, and was rewarded with a nice green drop. This should sell for a nice amount once we return to the capital. Fishing debris also turned out to be quite lucrative, with trunks containing lots of different loot like linen, wool and leather, and even a recipe for the swiftness potion. At this point I faced a decision. Should I sell the recipe at the auction house or learn alchemy myself and try to make a profit from crafting potions? Since I was heading back to the auction house anyway, I also picked up a couple of leatherworking patterns I thought might sell well. Sadly, they turned out to be disappointing. The swiftness potion recipe, however, was more interesting, as was some fancy fish meat I picked up along the way. I couldn't decide on the recipe yet, so I banked it and some of the herbs for later. I had to consider ingredient prices and the fact that I would have to abandon mining, and this could be a huge profit maker. Learning new skills set me back a bit financially, but it had to be done. Then I went back to questing, mining, and of course, crab farming. Though, I have to admit, the drop rate of those fine chunks of crab meat seemed specifically designed to test my patience. On my way back, I encountered the Strider Clutch Mother, a rare spawn, but unfortunately I was out of arrows. The fight was tense, but I managed to scrape through. One could say it was a clutch fight.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
With my new spoils and bags completely full, I returned to Darkshore. At the auction house, I finally decided to list the swiftness potion recipe. Mining was already proving profitable enough, and switching to alchemy didn't seem worth it given the margins. Selling herbs directly just made more sense. For you watching, this might seem like a fast decision, but believe me, I took my sweet time studying the prices at the auction house. You have to consider, I don't include every farm and trip to Darkshore in this video. Back out farming again, I finally hit level 20. Aspect of the cheetah unlocked, a true game changer. Faster travel, faster farming, and honestly, just a lot more fun. And then something unexpected happened. As I was about to head back to Auberdine, I noticed a small cat figurine. Now, if you ever played a hunter, you know exactly why those are exciting. These figurines can spawn a ghost saber pet when looted. While not the strongest in combat, it looks incredible and is a real collector's item. Usually, you need to loot several of those figurines before you get lucky, so I wasn't expecting much. But this one time, it spawned right away. Of course, at that exact moment, a nearby naga joined the fight. I panicked, but somehow survived with barely a sliver of health left. Unfortunately, Silverfang didn't make it. I had to abandon him in the chaos. But as the saying goes, the king is dead, long live the king. The ghost saber was mine, and besides its awesome look, it also came with claw ring 3, a nice little bonus. Back in Darkshore, I sold a few more items at the auction house. Coarse stone from tin veins turned out to be surprisingly lucrative, something to definitely keep in mind for later. I also trained a few new skills, and as I mentioned, aspect of the cheetah made the whole journey feel a lot smoother. Finally, I spent some time collecting cooking recipes and leveling the profession to a respectable point. I returned to Dolanar to get my recipe for Longshar mud snappers and easily obtainable eggs to bridge the gap to 50 skill points. Thanks to all the leftover fish and ingredients that did not sell, I had plenty to keep going higher. I logged out and was looking forward to the next day. After a week of farming, it was finally time to check the mailbox again and reap my rewards. Over time, I checked again and again to list the items that did not sell, only leaving us with the mail full of coins. So, what you see right now are the successful sales from my loot over the last 7 days. And there we have it. After 1 day and 6 hours of slash played, over 56 gold from fishing, herbs, ores, greens, and so on. I was pretty happy with the results, considering we used a good amount of time questing. If I would focus on farming, my efficiency should increase even further. Before heading into the serious grind for 100 gold, I decided to finish off the last remaining quests in Auberdine. The first on the list was an escort quest. This one gives you a choice. You can sneak around carefully, trying to avoid combat, or you can clear the path aggressively. Since the rewards were higher and clearing meant more loot and experience in general, I chose the direct approach.
I choose violence.
More enemies defeated, more potential coin in the pocket. Shortly after, I took another escort quest, this time protecting a dryad. The quest itself was easy, but there was an immediate problem. I couldn't hand it in. The turn-in NPC was in Ashenvale, which of course I'm locked out of. Then, while wandering nearby, I stumbled onto a quest I never discovered as a teenager. 1 shot, 1 kill. I know this one for a while now, but to be fair, without any questing add-ons, I'm not too sure if I would have discovered it by myself. Unfortunately, this too ended up being a to-be-continued situation, as the hand-in is also located in Ashenvale. Learning aspect of the cheetah was a real quality of life improvement. Suddenly, long runs along the shoreline weren't quite as painful anymore. I also put talent points into improving it further, making travel more efficient overall. In a challenge that involves a lot of running around, collecting herbs, fish and checking for rare spawns, every second counts. The shoreline itself continued to be a reliable farming route. Strangle kelp, fish and the occasional floating debris kept things moving. The trunks often felt like a lottery. Sometimes it's just junk, sometimes it's genuinely useful, but I guess that is what makes it fun as well. Rare hunting also remained part of my routine. During one of these sweeps, I found Shadowglen. The name sounds interesting, but in practice, the pet version of this cat has no special abilities or appearances. So instead of taming him, I defeated him and collected his green BOE drop. Sometimes I ventured far into the north. The naga camps offered something different. Because this area is for higher levels, we got good access to tin veins. And tin veins mean coarse stone, which has consistently sold well at the auction house. Sometimes the secondary materials, not the ore itself, can be more profitable. I was also hoping to encounter Lady Respira, the rare naga that roams around this area, but she didn't show up. What I did find, however, was another chest. Chests have become small highlights in this challenge for me. They break up the repetition and carry that sense of reward for exploration. One particularly memorable discovery happened by accident. While searching for more veins near Mist's Edge, I fell down the cliff. Normally just an annoyance, this time it led me to spotting a better chest. After filling my bags, I headed back to Darkshore and checked the auction house. To my surprise, both Swift Fizzle and Bronze Bars were at an all-time high. I listed what I had, hoping to take advantage of those prices. While there, I also made a purchase from a nearby vendor. A new bow for 57 silver. It was expensive at this stage, but as I mentioned in an earlier episode, better damage output means faster farming, which in turn means more gold over time. The investment itself made sense, even if it stung a bit in this moment. On top of that, endless shoreline runs had begun to lose their charm, so I decided to grind some more Filbergs instead and test out my new weapon. As you know by now, I used to spend hours farming them, but they also provide a steady drop of linen cloth, a bunch of copper, and the occasional green BOE that made it worthwhile. I handed in the last remaining quests. One of the rewards was a weapon I had loved when I first played Classic. Unfortunately, it was a sword, and as a night elf hunter locked away from Stormwind, I had no way to train it. So, with a heavy heart, I turned it into a nice amount of silver. The rare spawn hunt continued. The clutch modder spawned again, dropping another green. Carnivus the Breaker and Lady Moongazer, however, both eluded me for a long while. Eventually I did manage to track down Carnivus, who dropped a green item just as expected. The Strider Clutch Mother, on the other hand, showed up for the third time even. She spawns outside of major quest areas, so it's easier to keep tabs on her. While farming some crawlers along the shore, I also discovered a quote-unquote hidden tin vein. My macro allowed me to swap between tracking veins and tracking herbs with ease, so that was quite handy for locations like this. Back at the mailbox and the auction house, the story was the same as before. Greens don't move quickly, but when they do, it's a nice bump in gold. Since I went hunting for rares and grinded more humanoid NPCs than usual, I had a bunch of them to auction off. Returning to Auberdine, I also went after Fire Carla Redison, another rare spawn. No luck finding him, but I did get an 8-slot backdrop, which is just as valuable in practice. Backspace is one of those hidden currencies in Classic, especially in a loot-heavy challenge like this. Although Lady Vespera once again was nowhere to be seen, I continued farming the Naga camp. The area was too good to abandon. Herbs, clam meat and ores kept flowing, and the mobs continued to give a little bit of experience. Speaking of clam meat, in the current economy it turned out that it wasn't really worth it selling anymore. So I repurposed it to raise my cooking skill even further. It was satisfying to make use of something that otherwise would have just filled bags. I opened some more trunks, which always was a lot of fun, and headed back to Darkshore, thinking that this trip might be the final one to push ourselves to the Goldbound total. After a good night's sleep, it was time for the most rewarding moment, opening the mailbox. After 1 day and 15 hours of total playtime, the total came to 105 gold, more than enough to break free of Auberdine. With that milestone reached, I upgraded some professional skill caps, purchased a 14-slot bag and trained a few new abilities. After all expenses, I still had around 101 gold left, putting me in a strong position for the next stage. Fishing was the one profession I wasn't able to push further. A viewer suggested that I'm allowed to buy it from the auction house if I kill all the rares in Auberdine, and as you saw, I really tried, but unfortunately couldn't make it. Some of those NPCs spawn in heavily populated questing areas and are very hard to get. I also could have bought it instead of the bag, but 150 fishing should be more than enough for the next zone. No rush in increasing the cap right now. Maybe I get it next time. So, where do we go next? Technically, I could take a ship and explore new lands, but realistically, the next step will be Ashenvale. There are some quests waiting to be handed in. Also, the cookbook that raises cooking to 225 is located in that zone. It's something I need for myself, but it might also become a source of income. Players often pay extra for convenience, and the cookbook fits that category perfectly. Before closing out this episode, I want you to decide which mount I should buy. The spotted frost saber, the striped night saber, or the striped frost saber. Let me know in the comments. I'd like you to decide. I hope you join me in the next episode. For the sake of efficiency, I will probably also create a mail alt, since the flying paths are only going to get longer from here. As always, thank you for watching, have a great day, bye.